Okay, we're good. Okay, I think we're all ready to get started here. So thank you for coming out to presentation here. And I see some more people are trickling in, but we'll get started. So today, what we're going to talk about, as we see in the title, is making your manual processes more efficient and to eliminate them where possible using practical AI. And so as we go into the presentation today, we're really going to break that down about what do we mean by practical AI and what are some good examples of manual processes. But really, my goal today is to be as useful as possible. So we're not going to go into the details of how AI works and all that, but really what we're going to focus on are practical use cases that you could take and deploy at your organization. And I think more importantly, a framework where how can we identify what manual work you're doing today and to see if it's good candidates for applying some sort of AI automation, and then how to pick from all these candidates which ones to prioritize and do first. So without any further ado, a little bit about me. I'm Zane Frantzen. I'm the VP of Platform Operations at SimplyAsk. And in one of my roles, I lead the development of our AI automation platform, Symphona. And I also work with our clients to help them figure out how to turn their messy manual operational workflows into something that's more efficient and, in many cases, fully automated. Now, before I get started, let's just do a quick poll here to see who leaves the crowd, and then I can tailor the presentation a little bit. So just a quick hands up poll. Can you put your hands up if you're working in construction or at a development company? Okay, so about half. How about if you're working in a property management company? Another half. I guess that kind of matches the title here. And how about if you're working at maybe a construction material vendor? Okay, we've got some of those too. I'm sure there's others that I didn't get to there, but that's good to know. So to get started, what I want to talk about here is first the problem, because of course we want to frame what we're trying to solve before we start talking about tools and methods to solve it. And really, when we're talking about deploying AI automations, often talking about how to eliminate the hidden tasks or the manual work that's really driving all these issues that we often see, things like cost overruns, schedule drag, security risks, and frustrated team members. And these are things that you may not always quantify to actually see the real value. So you may be aware that these things are going on and they're not great, but you don't really quantify that down to what is the dollar impact to your business. And so that's why we put it into this category of the more hidden tax on the organization. Now, the one thing also to keep in mind here is that we're not only talking about time and cost impacts from all of these problems, but it also creates other risks. And so that could be uncertainty, where if you have consistent cost overruns or schedule drag, that's going to cause uncertainty in terms of your planning. There's other risks too, like even safety, and where you might be pushing your timelines so tight that people are going to pick the quickest option instead of the best option. And that's just obviously leading to risks and all the problems that come with that. So the question naturally becomes, okay, so we have this problem here. How can we solve it? And let's go into talking about what are some positive signals. And I keep playing the wrong button. Okay. So when we're looking at tasks we're doing today, whenever you're thinking about things you're doing, maybe it's your accounting team, you do processing invoices, maybe it's your project management team in terms of responding to RFPs or to coordinating tasks that your different team members are doing. It's really important to think about, are these types of features in those workflows or those tasks that you're doing? So are they high volume? Do you do this repetitively? Going back to the invoice example, maybe you receive 10, 100 invoices a day a week, and so that would be pretty repetitive. Is it text or document heavy? So are you, reading forms or creating forms, writing templates, and then going ahead and sending those to someone for, putting that data in maybe some software? Do you have in those processes oftentimes where you're asking questions? So, where is the latest type of question when you need to look up information across many different places? And then also, if you have standard policies or templates that exist, maybe you're sending a templated email at the end of every day, like a end of day report, for example. And at the end here, generally when you're adopting AI, especially in the early stages, you want to be looking into places where you can put a human in the loop for approval steps and to build confidence in using these systems. Critically though, regardless of all these positive signals, to even be able to assess them, you're going to need to know what your team is doing. So always the first step when we're talking organizations is working with them to understand what are the steps that they do in their common operational flow. So again, coming back to invoice processing, if you have flow of how those invoices get processed, if that's not documented yet, it's always a good place to start by writing that out so that you can figure out how to optimize. And really that comes down to any process transformation. I mean, at the end of the day, we're talking about adopting practical AI within your operations, but in many cases, you can also just make things more efficient by mapping out your process, seeing how you can tweak the manual process, and be done with it. But of course, you can add in additional tools to accelerate it, like AI itself. Now, equally, let's talk about, let's talk about where not to use AI, and these are negative signals. So if you have workflows where the decisions are high stakes and ambiguous, and you really need a human to make a judgment throughout, this end-to-end business process, then AI is not going to be a great thing for you. Also, if you have no agreed process or policy in place to follow, you're going to get unpredictable outcomes, and so that's generally not what you want. To give an example, I'm going to keep picking on invoices, I guess. If you don't have a process in place for how you code invoices, if you just tell AI to code the invoices however you want, it's probably not going to be very useful. So again, you need to have some sort of agreed process in place that then AI can use and automate on top of. Other things here, the data is missing. If, one person on your team has all the information they need in their head, you're going to need to get that down first before anyone's going to be able to implement something to automate that. And if you already have a simple template or automation in place, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. If it already does, 95% of the work, then that might not be a great first use case to start with. But really coming back to what I was getting to on the earlier slide, AI is not going to break or not going to fix your broken processes or your non-existing workflows. Really, what it's going to do is it's going to accelerate what you already have. And so you need to have an understanding of what your workflow is. And if you don't have that yet, that's always the first place to get started. So now that we've talked about, some of the positive signals and some of the negative signals, what we normally do with our clients is kind of walk through, okay, we've mapped them out, we figured out some good candidates. Let's put them on this matrix here of what's high potential and low risk. And so high potential being things that have lots of those positive signals. So, the repetitive processes that you do, you can put human tasks in when needed, and it's generally low risk. And low risk doesn't mean unimportant. Low risk could mean that the task is pretty benign in general, and if something goes wrong, things don't blow up, literally or figuratively. Or it could also be that you put in mitigating factors, like you put in a human in the loop to review or to approve or to edit things or handle manual tasks, from some point forward. So then there's a human touch to it as well. But overall, the idea is that you're trying to look for ways that you can make your work easier today without creating new risks for tomorrow. So now that we've talked about, these positive signals, negative signals, how to classify them and start prioritizing what's useful, let's talk a little bit about the features of processes that make them highly automatable and valuable. And I promise I will get to concrete use cases. I just kind of want to walk you through our standard process here, how we're selecting processes. And actually, just to top up on that, I think it is very important to go through these steps of identifying for your organization what workflows are automatable based on those signals, based on that matrix. Because every organization is different. So, every company is going to have some way to process invoices, let's say. But the way and the steps that they do that are going to look different for everyone. So it's important to go through these steps on you. Now, in terms of what makes certain processes at your organization really good for automation, and we could say are good ingredients for it, can be broken down here. So if you have processes that are triggered on some sort of event, maybe an email's received, because an invoice to emails received, or maybe for property management, if you have a resident who wants to submit a request to get new building keys or to book an amenity, and that comes in through a web form or through an email that kicks off that work, that's a great candidate. Also, if you have processes that run on a regular basis, maybe an end-of-day report that you want generated automatically and then sent to team members. Again, that's something that's kicked off by an event and generally is something that is a good place to start when you're thinking about what could I automate like this. In terms of other features that come up in automatable processes, we often see ones where maybe your team members are entering in data into different systems, or maybe they're comparing information from different software that you have. So that's generally a good flag. We also see, if you're analyzing information or sending templatized emails, that's a good candidate. Or maybe you're coordinating manual tasks, where you want to make sure that tasks happen on time and then do automated follow-ups. Again, good ingredients to see there. When we're talking about some other areas, so maybe you have team members when they're working on tasks, they need to find information more readily. Maybe they need to draft a proposal, or they need to perform updates in many different places at once because you have different systems. Maybe you have like a project management system and an accounting system that you both need to update project information in. Then again, this is another indicator that you might have a process that's good for automating. At the very end here, we always like to recommend processes where you have a defined outcome, so you can measure the before and after. So your fully manual process versus a process which maybe has some automation in it, and you can compare the value of how fast things are being done and what you're actually getting. Now, when we're looking at how to make use of these, we commonly see a repeatable pattern of tools where we have AI agents which you can chat with, and they could be like a co-pilot that works with you on tasks and can maybe perform actions like finding information, generating draft materials, performing updates, and so on. But then we also see workflow automation, where you might have a defined set of steps that your team is doing. And so each of those steps could be a manual task, it could be an automated task, but you want to coordinate that. And then we have task management as well that we often see where you have a human in the loop to do approvals where appropriate. But at the end of the day, when we're talking about practical AI, we're really talking about an end-to-end process where you have some event maybe that kicks it off, then you have it connecting to different systems, and you have it following a specific structure. We're not just talking about like a Q&A chatbot like ChatGPT, but we're talking about something that's reliable and is doing the same set of steps over and over again so that you can trust that it's going to do what you want it to do. Okay, so let's talk about some concrete use cases here. The first one, as I mentioned, there's many more, but the first one here is around invoice triage. And so the idea is that your finance team might be receiving invoices for payment, and these could come in through emails, for example. And the idea is that when an email is received, you could use AI to classify it. Maybe you want to classify it as a general question, as an actual invoice for payment, or as a spam message you want to respond to. And then you can do different things with it. So maybe if it's an invoice for payment, then it's going to open a manual task. Maybe it's going to check if that invoice actually should be paid, if there's actually a person who is owed money. And if it's maybe just a general question, you can use AI to automatically respond to it, send a response, and your team members and accountants don't need to spend time on actually doing it. Another example here, more on the project management side, is RFP response generation. And so this is interesting, where you could provide AI a set of project documents, your past responses, any guidelines or starting points you wanted to work off of. And it can start to generate you a initial new proposal. And then you can iterate and work back and forward with it until you get to something final, and then it can be tweaked. But I think a more interesting variant of this use case is actually around using AI to validate your responses after they're fully written. And so the idea is that to do a final sanity check where you can give it all of your documentation, including diagrams, which may have requirements written on the margins, and have it checked to make sure that no requirements are missed or misproposed. And so, many organizations we work with tell us we have 2 or 3 or more % of our project budget allocated to this contingency. And even if you can just reduce 50% of that, it's additional profit margin on the project that you can capture. Switching gears here to safety, we often see use cases around searching up documentation. This isn't specifically for safety, but to make this more concrete, let's talk about safety. You might have 500 safety documents, which all have different information in it, and then plus you have maybe provincial or federal standards. And so what you can do is you can hook up a AI agent, which is trained on all of this documentation, maybe even websites, and then have it quickly provide answers from there with references that your team members can refer to. And a related one here, more for general operations, is around documentation auditing. And so on the documentation auditing front, it's really about breaking down documents that you have and comparing them against the rest. So to give a concrete example, back to safety, maybe you have 500 safety documents developed over 10, 20 years, and you want to check if one document conflicts with the other 499. To do that statement by statement is definitely impossible for humans, but this is a great use case where only AI can actually do that level of comparison, provide you a report at the end and say, here are all the specific conflicts, here's what you should fix. We actually had a case using this where we were working with a company and we found that they had one document say, if unexploded explosives don't go off, wait 60 minutes, and another document say, wait 10 minutes. And so that's probably not a discrepancy that you want. And again, these are things that they're not aware of because doing that, statement by statement comparison across hundreds or thousands of documents is not going to be possible. But again, this can be applied more than just for safety. This could also be applied for finance, for project plans, all of that. And switching gears more towards support. So on the internal support side, we talked a little bit about that documentation chat where you can search up information, but we also see this more for external as well. So maybe if you have for property managers, residents who want to be able to answer their questions or submit requests, maybe to book an amenity or get a maintenance request submitted. You can set up a quick support here, which would go ahead and do that, capture the request, maybe fully automate it by passing that data on to other software that you use, or creating manual tasks that your team members would then work on themselves. The key idea here, though, is that those are just a few example use cases. And as I mentioned earlier on, every organization is different. So the exact solution that you build may look a little bit different, but these are ones that we kind of see as a common pattern. Now, in terms of where to actually roll things out, we always recommend a crawl, walk, run type of approach, where you can start, in your first 30 days, trialing out, building, 1 or 2 automated workflows. Once you've proven that, pick a few other ones, and then you can go from there, where you can work with other teams, get some ideas of what to automate across your organization, and work on scaling that over time. Now, in terms of how you actually build out this automation, maybe the use cases I mentioned, maybe other ones I didn't get into. There are different tools out there, but they don't have to be technical. You don't have to be a coder or anything like that. And we will take a look at that now when we go into a quick demo here. So we can play the video. That'd be great. It's not this video, video. Okay. Here we go. So in this video here, we see, this is for an RFP response reviewer, where we can give it our response files, we can give it the original RFP package, and we can tell it to kick off a review process. And once it's done that, it's going to go ahead and send us an email with, all of the things that it's found in terms of critical issues, in terms of what should specifically be fixed, and, how to fix it. And we'll go on from there, for example. In a different use case here, we're going to look at the documentation search. And so here we can just ask it questions, what are some key risks in this policy? And it would go ahead, search a knowledge base, which could be a set of files or websites, and then it would give us back answers. And the format it gives us back is fully configurable, but in our case here, because it's safety documentation, we want exact snippets, not just like a ChatGPT paraphrase response. Now, looking at a different one, this is the invoice processing. Here we will send a example invoice from my email, and that is going to get into our system. We see an invoices log, and when we open that up, we see that it's going through steps that are being automated. And so it sent an automatic email, it's opened up a task to track it, and now it's waiting at an approval step. And so here we can see the email info we just sent. And if we go into the email, we'll see, we got our automatic acknowledgement email. And when we open up the ticket, we can see we have a manual task waiting to review this invoice. You can see the invoice details. You can see who it's from. And we'll have an approval step to approve it, so it can continue on and, actually go ahead and issue payment. And so in this case here, clicking approve, we can approve it like that. Now, switching gears to the property management side, you might have this portal for residents where they can go ahead and submit different requests. And so that might be a maintenance request, that might be an amenity. You can just have a conversation with it, and then the AI would be able to provide support where, okay, book an amenity, what do you want to book? And then it can have this back and forth conversation to actually fulfill the request. And it could even go and book that in whatever software you have. Or open a manual task for your team members to work on themselves. Now, let's look at how things are set up. Now, for those AI conversations that we have, the different ones, they're all set up just by setting it up in English, where you set up objectives about what you want it to be able to do and how it can do it. And so those are different actions. And so for searching a knowledge base, we select a knowledge base, and then we tell it, how to return the response, the document name, blah, blah. And there's other actions that you can perform here too. So if we want to go ahead and create a manual task or connect to another software or transfer to human, you can set that all up here. It's just easy to select. Now, the other piece is about the configuration is you can give it a role and give it some more context about your business, and you can simply toggle on multilingual support, collecting feedback, including references to where it found information. And for finding information, you can configure knowledge bases that are trained on hundreds of files that you give it, or maybe websites you want it to crawl. Again, you just set it up and it all works. Now, in terms of defined processes, we looked at when we submitted an invoice, it went through some steps, and then it waited at this approval step over here. In our case, we can set up these workflows by dragging and dropping and building up the flow, and then you just click on the step and you define some details. So for email, you give it a message you want to send it to. For the classifying step, we just tell the AI to classify it into different categories, and it'll do it. And then you can have branches. So if it's an invoice for this, if it's not an invoice for this, and you can build it out. But the idea really is that if you can map out what your process is on paper, who's doing it, what's being done, then you should be able to build out a flow here, dragging and dropping, send an email, work with an Excel file, navigate a web page, identify or summarize information with AI, just all dragging and dropping into the flow here. And all this is easy to monitor. So you have the ability to audit conversations, who had it, what did they say, where were they, what's feedback about the conversation. And in terms of automated processes, when actions are taken on your business, you can also take a look into what happened, and you have a whole audit trail here. So that was a really quick demo there. But the key idea is that all these different workflows I was going through before, you can build them out very easily using these types of no-code platforms. And you don't need to be an expert to do so. Really, all you need to know is what is your process, what are you doing today, what are the steps, and then dragging and dropping and building it out here. So to wrap up, if there's only one thing you take away from this presentation, is that I would recommend to start with one workflow that is high potential and low risk. And the idea being that you can build internal trust with these types of automation solutions, especially if you have none, and then scale them from there. And if your workflows are not mapped out yet, that is definitely a prerequisite that you'll want to get in place first. And if you're not sure where to start with any of that, feel free to come by. We have our booth directly behind us with our bright sign, and we'd be happy to chat with you about different use cases and what you're doing with your organization. But at the end of the day, just keep in mind that turning on AI is not a strategy alone. Operational clarity, where you have a good understanding of your workflows, who's doing it, how it's getting done, is actually the strategy. And once you have it, then AI can accelerate what you do. Thank you.